I'd like to call this back together for our last session of the day. A little earlier this fall, I asked some of our team members to help out with us as we were, some of the background context for some of the questions we're asking today had a lot to do with the changing nature of the learning environment at UBC. We're involved with looking at, along with classroom services, changes in the design guidelines for classrooms, and we're also looking at the changing technology space and how we ensure that the kind of environments, the kind of the structures we put in place as a campus support learning. And we also have a new strategic plan which talks about that exceptional learning environment. And the question for me was, what do we mean by an exceptional learning environment? What are the dimensions of that exceptional learning environment? And so the team took up the challenge, and one of the things that we've been doing, and we'll be doing onward, I believe, this year, is holding World Cafés where people get together to look at a couple of questions related to the exceptional learning environment. And I'm pleased today to introduce you to Cindy Hill, who is a strategist with Cindy Underhill. Michelle Overburnt. And Victor No, who is a student within a third-year human geography student who's been helping Cindy to conduct those World Cafés. So they're going to talk a little bit about that experience, some of the early results from it, and encourage you, I believe, to keep engaging with it. So over to you, Cindy.
Thanks, Michelle. Can you hear me? Am I? Okay, good. Thanks. I'm just going to set that down there. Thanks for staying with us till the end of the day as we share some of our the outcomes of our discussions from earlier this month. Maybe before we start, though, I think what I'd like to do is thank our previous speakers for helping us to reflect on some of the diversity of histories and stories and perspectives that we bring to our notions of the ideal or exceptional learning environments. I think this diversity can only enrich our discussions as we go forward, but I think as Link Kessler said, we need to find a way to do that in the most productive way possible to make those discussions meaningful and really help us to develop the best kind of learning environments that we can for all of us. Because as we know from our discussions, a great learning environment means different things to different people depending on your perspectives. So just to start off with that, thank you. How many of you know what a World Café is? Okay, so for those of you who don't, it's really an approach, a creative approach to discussion where important or sort of big ideas are presented, big questions are presented for discussion. And people tend to rotate around those discussions, draw out some themes, make some connections, really do a lot of brainstorming around those questions. And the idea of the World Café is that those questions are important enough that they'll be discussed in other places outside that initial discussion group with neighbors, friends, colleagues in faculties and departments. So we certainly hope that will happen. And we hope to draw out a little bit of discussion as time allows for us today. So what you'll see on the two screens beside you, on this side, this is the outcome, and this is in something called a Wordle. Victor's going to talk about the process of creating that in just a moment so you get the context. But this is kind of the summary outcome of a lot of discussion that happened on the teacher side, where people who identified themselves as teachers had a discussion around what's the best teaching experience you've had lately, and what are some of the ingredients that made it a really good teaching experience. So that's some of the outcome from that. On the other side, we had asked those same questions of learners. So what's a really good learning experience you had lately? And what are some of the ingredients that made that a really good learning experience? So this is kind of a summary of the outcome, and I'm going to pass it over to Victor now to talk about how this was created, this Wordle. Turned on? You might have to talk really loud.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So my role within the World Café was to essentially capture all the information coming out from these discussions. The turnout was not as high as we wanted, but nonetheless, we got a very good discussion going on and a lot of ideas that came out of that. So a Wordle is essentially a word cloud, and in the process of generating a Wordle, you essentially take keywords from the information that, from all the data we got, and any keywords that appeared more times was given more provenance in size. So, for example, on the learner side, collaboration was a big idea that kept consistently coming up. So more prominence was towards that. And it allows you to compare and contrast, what are the key ideas that makes an ideal learning environment from a teacher's perspective and a learner's perspective.
Thanks, Victor. So what we wanted to do is ask you, as you're looking at this, and if you can't see it clearly, some of these are floating around the room. What are some themes that stand out for you? Do some of the themes identified here ring true? Is your own experience quite different from this? We just really appreciate having some comments from you about this and your perspectives on what makes a good learning environment. Yeah. So is that on the teacher? Yeah. So the idea here is that people in a teaching role want to be able to be adaptable and responsive in the moment when things aren't quite working as expected in their classroom. And so, we had some great examples of that this morning with Yael and her living lab demonstration. The idea that people can do that in the moment and don't feel restricted in doing that. Other questions? Comments? Yeah, sorry.
Just as a comment, one of the things that stood out for me was on the learners page, blurring the hierarchy. And then on the teachers page, the student empowerment and student engagement piece. And it seems to me that those are really complementary. And I think also that they fit in with some of the comments that have been made throughout the day about moving past the sage on the stage approach to something that is more collaborative and more engaging all around. So it was just kind of neat. That was the first thing that stood out for me.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. There was a lot of discussion around that issue of blurring the hierarchy, creating a community of learners that involve both the learners and the teachers sharing together. Learners don't want to be considered as the empty vessels coming to class with no prior experience and anything to share. So that was really important. And David Vogt did bring that up this morning when he talked about a teacher as part of the learning community and how that was important to him as a teacher. And then Judy Brown talking about her roles as both teacher and learner and how one informs the other. So those notions are really important to people and complementary, as you say. Thanks. Other comments, questions, thoughts? Yeah. Amy.
I might have missed this as well, but when we say student, is that undergraduate student? Graduate student?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We had a mix. We asked people to essentially self-identify as either learners or teachers and attend the session that was most closely related to their role at UBC. So that's what happened. So on the teacher side, we had some graduate students who had TA responsibilities. On the learner side, we had undergraduate students and graduate students. And we had, I don't know if Victor mentioned, but a total of about 20 participants. So there's, you can't make general sort of sweeping statements based on that small number of students or teachers. But really what we meant to do is start the conversation, and then we'll continue it throughout the year with more World Café discussions like this. Yeah?
We're noticing there's quite a different collaboration for the students. There's a much bigger Wordle for collaboration, and for the teachers it's much smaller. We were just wondering how the discussions were different between the two groups.
Well, you'll notice that community of practice was sort of higher on the teacher side. And so what the teachers were really getting at is what does a good learning environment look like for them as teachers? So community of practice was very important in terms of sharing resources with each other, et cetera. So collaboration took on a different focus there. It was more about the community of practice. Does that answer your question? Other questions, comments? Did you have something? Yeah.
Thanks. An observation of another difference. I only see on the learner side any comments about the actual classroom environment, the temperature, the acoustics, all those kinds of things. So I think it's kind of interesting that the learners seemed much more sensitive to that.
Yeah. Again, lots of discussion around that. Not quite sure why, but particularly the fact that rooms were cold often, and that learners didn't know how to deal with that, like whether they should tell the instructor, not tell them, just how to deal with that. So they were thinking about it a lot, and it took away from their learning. Other questions, comments?
I just wondered what happened when the different groups looked at their opposites results in the Wordle, and what the conversation, what surprised them. Was that a process that took place too?
This hasn't gone out yet. Thanks for that question. So we've put together some wiki pages, and that's where this comes from. You'll see them on the wiki stations at the back there as well. Which basically, what Victor did was he took photographs of the whole process and basically documented what went on in the discussion. So we have that kind of that raw data there as well, in addition to these interpretations. So this will go out to all of the participants in the group. And as we gather more data through further discussions, what we're asking people to do in those World Café discussions is identify who they think they'd like to see this information. And so we'll make those wiki pages as widely available to as many different people as possible, hoping that this could potentially inform some decision-making that people are in the process of. Over the next one. Sorry.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah.
I do encourage you to look at the wiki page, because it provides a lot more context and detail behind those exact themes and ideas. And it's presented also in a mind map and also a table, so just feel free to browse through it.
So just to sum up then, from the learner's side, an ideal learning environment involves a few things. Small scale, based on relationships, a lot of talk about relationships, so that was important to people. Real dialogue and content contribution between and among learners and faculty in a non-hierarchical manner. Many different ways to engage with content. Learners talked a lot about the online environment as well, but not necessarily in the context of the classroom. Those could be resources that were made available to learners after the class, so that was important to them. And again, this was another major point of discussion, engagement in real world issues, projects, and questions. So what they're really getting at there is the authentic learning environment. So learners who had the opportunity to participate in those kinds of learning activities were really happy with that. For teachers, an ideal teaching environment functions primarily as a community of practice. And so significant words associated with that were respect, encouragement, acknowledgement, and sharing. They really felt it was important for us to support a flexible and responsive teaching environment. So they really need the ability to adjust and make adjustments on the fly as they're teaching. Motivating and engaging students was another big theme, and is effectively supported by the institution. So this didn't really come up as a major conversation point with learners, but certainly it did with teachers. So, and by effectively supported, meaning physical space, technical support, and personal support. So all of those pieces are important. So thank you very much for your attention. If there are no further questions, I think that Harry is going to close out the day with some final comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Want to sing a song?
Well, actually, you kind of need Kelly for that. You don't want me singing. It's just bad. It's just not. I think I've told others, my husband turns up the radio very, very subtly in the car if I start to sing. So it's my pleasure, actually, to introduce my co-director, Harry Hubball, who is the Senior Advisor and Academic Director Pro Tem of the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology, and he's going to close the day.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you just put your hand up if you was here for the whole day, if you were lucky enough to be here for the whole day? Brilliant. Okay, if you were here for the morning session, great. And, of course, you're all here for the afternoon session, so that's pretty obvious. And also, I'd like to say a big thank you to, we've got a group of Beijing professors who are here today. You just want to put your hands up? Beijing. So welcome, and thanks for coming along as well. So we've had a really big attendance and a super agenda, and I want to say thank you to all the presenters, all the panellists, and in particular to the organising team, which I'll say a little bit at the end. But for those folks who weren't lucky enough to be able to come for the whole of the day, I'll just read you some of the aspects that went through the organising of today that the folks have been involved with. First of all, it was opened by Larry Grant, the elder that we heard this afternoon, and also Michelle Lamberson and Anna Kindler. There were discussions around learning spaces, around Aboriginal histories and engagement, sustainability education, intercultural understanding, sustainability education, and the World Café. Did I miss the learning spaces? And the learning spaces as well. So a very broad an exciting programme that was put forward, and some very interesting discussions that came up. So I'd like us to continue the dialogue and the discussions as we enjoy the reception, but I just wanted to recognise Kelly Fleming and all her organisation team, and in particular there were many names who put a lot into this for us to enjoy the discussion and the dialogue, and also in particular to Suki, Zach, and all the volunteers. So can we give them a great big round of applause, please? I just wanted to say a few words in that I've just come back with a few people from the International Conference on the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And it's amazing how many people are aware of what's going on at UBC and often look at UBC and envy our resources, our programme, and also the various initiatives that are coming from. So we all know at UBC we've got a long way to go, and I think that came out from many of the panellists and a lot of the discussion. But we're also in a great position to put forward a lot of innovation. And I think along with this exceptional learning environment comes issues around what literature are we drawing upon and can we draw upon to inform our practice when it comes to exceptional learning environments. What kind of experiences can we draw upon? And the panellists and the presentations gave us a lot to think about there. And as well as what type of methodology can we consider in a whole range of different contexts that we operate here at UBC. For some people it's in clinical settings, for some people it's in seminars, for some people it's large classes, for other people it's traditional seminar classes or in field practicum. A whole range of diversity of areas where exceptional learning environments can be considered, and I think there were some brilliant ideas on getting us to thinking about that and how that discussion will continue with innovation. And along with that, of course, becomes scholarship. How do we know what we're doing works, or to what extent is it having an impact? And how can we monitor that? How can we measure that? What data can we consider that might help us inform that, so that we can disseminate that to help others as well as contribute to the body of literature in that area? So again, thanks everybody for attending, and especially for the organisation team, Kelly and your group. That was fantastic. And let's enjoy the reception and the food and continue the dialogue. Thanks very much.